Lord, thank you for this day, for a day set aside to specifically worship you. Lord, I think you can find our rest in you. Thank you, Lord, for this country and for the rule of law that we have. Lord, I thank you that the rest of the world was astonished that we could have peaceful transition of power. Lord, thank you for governments, that you institute them and you guide them, and we should be praying for them to increase the prosperity and peace of this country and the nations around the world. Thank you for this study. I pray that you'll help us engage in our government more and that we will see the universal truths that are rooted in your word. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Good prayer, because we should have mentioned that the governments are instituted by the Lord. Well, I want to give some background before we get into the Constitution. And there was a thing called the Articles of Confederation. And you know what a confederation is, right? It's a loose union of states.
Okay.
1861 to 1865, the Confederacy,
Yeah.
right? CSA. Even Georgia and other states sometimes rebelled against Jefferson Davis and the Confederate government because they felt states' rights and county rights, whatever. So the Articles of Confederation was kind of weak. Had no executive, no judiciary. The Congress had to ask for money. They couldn't really field an army and navy. It was, kind of weak. It was just a little something like a fill, and that was 1781 to 1787. It did settle or establish the Northwest Ordinance, which Ohio was living on. It was living in Ohio, Michigan, like that. How to become part of the United States when you got a certain amount of people. Townships, each 36 townships, 6 by 6, and one was set aside for education and religion, because they believed that was the most important thing, to educate people. So it did some good things, but it was kind of weak. And it's like this: if you have a car, and one week it's the carburetor, next it's a set of tires, next it's the water pump, then it's the fuel pump.
I've got to figure that.
After a while, you say what?
Get rid of it.
Get rid of it. We have to, but now we can't. Got to be careful about this. They had meant to settle some problems along the Potomac, some of the states, and they said, why don't we have some other states to come along? We'll go to Philly, and we'll see if we can correct this Article Confederation. But the same thing happened as with the car. Well, let's change this. Let's change that. Let's change. I think, guys, we better write a whole new thing. But can't tell anybody, because the people will be up in arms. How does the Constitution start? We the people? No, they weren't involved in this. It was in May of 1787. This will go until September 17th, Constitution Day. They put a guard at the door. They closed all the windows in a very, very hot, sultry summer, and the air conditioner wasn't working well. So they talked. There's a thing, Robert's Rules of Order, where you can talk openly. I forget what they call that. Let me think. And it doesn't really count yet until you go for a vote. But you can say anything you want, but it doesn't really count. And they started to discuss things. But the big question is, what type of government are we going to establish? And these are all learned men, steeped in history. I have a book home of all the republics in history, just about, and they knew about all these from Greece, Rome, Venice, and all this. But what type of government? And there's a couple of spectrums I'd like you to look at here. One is the familiar one, left, right, center, right, or moderate. That comes from the French Assembly after their revolution had started. And in the National Assembly, the speaker, the one speaking, would look out at the people, the delegates, and to his left was the Jacobins, the radicals who wanted to just tear up everything. To his right was the monarchists who wanted the old order back. And in the center, of course, was the moderates. That's how we got passed down left, and right. So on the left is usually more liberal people, social activism, using government money for programs and all the way to communism, all right? On the right is more or less fascist or Nazi, where, and the big difference in them two is the fascists allow you to own your company, but we're gonna tell you how to run it, regulate it, just like they were doing under Biden and Obama. You could have your business, we're gonna regulate you so much, but the communists, they just take over everything. You don't own anything. We'll talk more about that, the collectives and how they slaughtered 10 million Ukrainians because they resisted. So this might be a better political spectrum. From this side, you don't have to, left, right, it doesn't matter which side, is total government control, like a Marxist government. I mean, everything. There's a book I read called The Whisperers. That's how people had to talk in whispers. What did you do today? Because there were microphones all over, KGB all over. And in their paradise, like in this downstairs here, might be 5, 6 families, 1 bathroom, 1 kitchen, but that was paradise. But if you said anything against it, knock on the door, and into what the Germans used to call the Nacht und Nebel, the night in the fogs, all right? So that's Marxist, total on. To the right, or whatever side you want, anarchy, no government at all. You've heard, and that's what some of these people are doing now. Let's just upset everything, okay? Which is very dangerous. That's Saul Alinsky and guys like that. Socialism is heading towards communism. Marx says first social society, then comes, it fades away, and then we have total communism where there's no classes of people. Everybody, just like in the French Revolution, everybody was called citoyen, which means citizen. You're a citizen here, but you're up there, I'm down here. Same thing, comrade Stalin sending millions of guys to the gold fields to dig with no gloves or anything like that in the cold in Vladivostok. But he was Comrade Stalin. He lived in a dach, a big, they had to live in a hut, but they were all comrades. You ever read Animal Farm? You're right? All are equal, only some are more equal, right? So socialism allows private enterprise. They take care of the big ones, like the railroads. You go to Europe, the railroads owned like French railroads, the Eisenbahn, the Germans, Lufthansa was Air France. They own the big things, and you could have your medium or small size businesses, but they're very highly regulated. That's why it stifles enterprise, not like us. So here's some various forms of democracy. Demos is people, and Krasi is rule. So supposedly the rule of the people. That came from Greece. Everybody likes to point how great they were, but you remember, and I think it was chapter 19 in Acts, Paul is in Athens, and he said all the people did all day long, just talked about this idea, that, oh, let's hear this babbler. Maybe he's got something to say, and then they laughed at him. But the reason they could do that, they had their slaves to do all the work, the helots. So they had a charmed life. They could get up in the morning, go down to the agora, the forum, what the Romans will call it, and just start, hey, what do you think there? What do you think there? And then they go home and the slaves do all the work. But they did have local votes of people who and that's where we got the words ostracized, because that was a piece of pottery. And you could write down the name of a guy you wanted to get out, so you ostracize him, right? This is a republic. This is what we have. The people vote for representatives to govern them. Now, there's a big difference between governing and ruling. There's people in the United States that want to have power to rule over us. Other people want power to govern over us. Big difference, all right? But we're a federated republic. We're going to see why when we get into the Constitution. But we are a republic, all right? Now, very careful. We're a true republic because there are, and always beware of a country that has either People's or Democratic in their title, all right? People's Republic of China.
Yeah.
Doesn't work, does it? No.
No.
Just GDR, German Democratic Republic. That's where I was almost shot, you know. Good thing, this guy, Walter Ulbricht, he was as cold as anything. Even his friends said that. After the war, Stalin said, go in and do anything you want to Berlin. Subjugate it, all right? And he said to his men, talk about democracy over and over, but prepare for total control. And what's happening now? You hear these people in the country say, democracy, democracy. Right, they want control. That's what it sounds good, all right?
Mhm.
Now, an oligarchy is a few powerful men, usually the money class. The Soviets have that now under Putin. They for a while, the oligarchs had a lot more power before he started poisoning guys and sending them to jail. But you hear Bernie and Alexandria talk about fight oligarchy. And then they jump into a plane that costs $15,000 an hour.
Yeah.
Right? Now, wait a second. I scratched my head and said, he says, and he, no apology, he says, I need that. You want me to stand online at United? In other words, I'm too good for that. I got people, I have 30,000 people waiting for me. I make no apologies for that. And he has 3 houses and millions of dollars. But he's not an oligarch. He's just like you and I. Just a peasant, you know. A monarchy, we know, is ruled by a king, queen, and emperor. Emperor's higher than a king. And an absolute monarchy means they have pretty much total control. Nothing like communism, but Henry VIII was an absolute monarch. Louis XIV, the Sun King, you know, absolute monarch. But it usually goes to your head. Because they said they rule by divine right. God told me to, and I pass it down to my son. Even if he's a babbling idiot, he's still the king's son, you know, that's it, by blood. And then, of course, the totalitarian, they rule everything. Even in communism and Nazism, they would take kids at 7 years of age and put them in a camp. The communists were good for this. Mm-hmm. And your parents were allowed to visit you, but Sparta did the same thing, 7 years of age. That's grade 2 usually, ECE, early education, I forget, up to 2nd grade. That means that's the first time your cells change, right? Mm-hmm. And that's the age they take you and they put you in the camp, and you will now ward of the state. And your parents are allowed to visit you, but don't tell them, you know. When I used to write to the people in the Soviet Union, you know, after school they would take their kids downstairs in the cellar and turn on the water, maybe, or radio. Say, what did you learn today? Well, we learned that Christianity is slavery, and then, you know, no, and they try to tell them over and over, no, the Bible. But that's scary, how to live, way to live. And of course, in each sports team or school, there was always informers working for the state. In fact, in Stalin's times, if a kid disagreed with the teacher enough, he could be taken out and shot. And kids were 12 years of age, just taken out and shot because they disagreed with the almighty, Stalin. All right. Any questions? Okay. Let's see something. I'm going to give you a little something. I love to think about political theory and things like that. And I boil things down to what's going on in the country to 3 squares. Right? Yeah. You tell me with your 3 squares by the opposition there. This is a certain people of a certain party. Square number 1. We are never wrong. They are, I can't even spell, I got bad shoulders, that's why I can't write too well sometimes when it's up like this. John Kerry said at Davos, there was several powerful men there, he says, isn't this something, how we 12 or 10 have been appointed to save the planet,
Yeah.
right? A self-appointed Messiah. They know, much better than us. So that's square number one. That's the basic, all right? So square number two, we liberate, but they won't tell you what comes after that. To subjugate. After the war, as the Nazis retreated, the Soviets moved into Poland, Czechoslovakia, Romania, and all. And they liberated from fascism to impose an even worse regimen. I've read about people who lived on the boat. They said they'll take the Nazis anytime. The Nazis, they said, were amateurs when it came to torture. The Soviets were like astounding. They would, Nazism wasn't great, but it was, compared to communism, it was unbelievable. So I have so many things here. I want to read off some of these things that they're liberating us from, and the things that they're going to, well, they don't tell us they're going to subjugate, but that's what really happens. So here's some of the things they want to liberate us from. Christianity. Religion in general, but especially Christianity. That's a threat to them. Patriotism. Flag wavers, you know. When a country is taken over, the two things they immediately forbid is the flag and the anthem. Now, what have they been attacking these last few years? Even the anthem, and then we're going to go over the pledge a little bit. And you prayed about the rule of law. That's what we stand for, the rule of law. There's an old Latin expression, lex rex. The law is king. That comes all the way back in English history, 2,000 years almost. We believe, they were against man, just a man and a woman. That's outmoded, all right? They were against the basic education, 3 R's. We're going to see what they want. We're too much pro-cop, pro-military. We're mostly pro-life, not everybody, and we're for, limited legal immigration. My grandfather, some of you people have, grandparents or whatever that came over the legal way. So here's what they want to give us the freedom of, we call it subjugation, okay? Globalism, the United States is not special. The other country, remember the apology tour by Obama? Everyone is right. So you cloud the differences of people. Again, down with the flag and the anthem and the pledge. The law is malleable. You talk again, rule of law? No, not really. You can change it. Just as a woman. That's why they want to take over, so they can change it. Many genders. And by the way, they want women to rule. If you look at commercials, study them for a while. If I was from another planet and I looked at TV, these commercials, I would conclude that 95% of the American families have only girls. Very rarely do you see boys. in and he's usually coached by a girl who's wise. In fact, she's wiser than her father. And okay, they want more social education. Who cares about reading and writing, arithmetic? The social aspect of things. We got to help people out. In fact, in one school in the city, they allowed their kids to leave school to go to a rally, a leftist rally, not a conservative rally, all right? They hate cops, our cops, our military. They want their cops, all right? Notice some of these states and cities that have defunded the police are saying, you know, crime is on the rise.
Yeah, man.
I wonder why. Can't be that there's fewer cops, because, you know, the criminal, he's a pretty good guy. He won't take advantage of that. See, that's most of them are pro-abortion. In fact, in New York State, for 16 years, this is years ago now, the Assembly, all Democratic, very leftist, passed a pro-abortion bill. And for 16 years, the Republican Senate knocked it down. So they didn't have it. Came the day that they're a fantastic organization. The Democrats took over the state Senate. So they had both houses. What do you think is the first bill they passed? Abortion. Anytime you want. They couldn't wait. To the 16 years they waited to do that. They want unlimited immigration. Here's two things that are going to crush the country. And how long our republic can last, I don't know. But John Adams said, 2 ways to kill a country is by the sword and by inflation. The money system. And guess what was happening in the last 4 years when trillions, I don't know if we could ever fix that. And unlimited immigration, which we're going to see for representation in Congress, they may not be able to vote, or they will somehow get them to vote, but they could count them, and therefore they will have more people in the Congress. I like this. And number 3 is that's different. We're going to see about the 25th Amendment. In his first term, walking down a ramp, Donald Trump stumbled a little bit. Pelosi went ballistic. 25th Amendment, get rid of him, 25th Amendment. It's a fantastic amendment we're going to see. It didn't happen, okay? But Biden remember he walked up the stairs he fell 3 times. What did they say? None. Fell off his bike. Tripped over there. Shook hands with Casper the Ghost. Didn't know how to get it. No 25th Amendment. Why? Because that's different. And anytime it's different, refer to number 1. Stacey Abrams. You know, they said, Donald Trump said his election was stolen. It was a good, fair election. But they excoriated him for even mentioning that. Stacey Abrams, the black girl in Georgia who lost the election twice, she says, it was stolen. And the newspaper said nothing. Why? It's different. You have to refer to number 1. We're never wrong. And that gets you a little bit, you say, wait a second, how about a little balance? How about fairness? When we talk about the freedom of the press, we're going to see, how about that? For instance, no one's above the law, they say, Trump and all. No. Now they storm that facility, that ICE facility. Yeah. Isn't that against the law?
Yes.
Even if you're a congressman?
Yes.
Except it's different.
But maybe not.
Maybe not, yeah. Now it was, as we're going to see in the Constitution, Section 6, I think, Article 2, that they're immune from prosecution when they're in Congress, doing Congress business, but not on the street. when you're just a regular person. So they say, no, we have immunity. Yeah, you do, when you're in Congress. But now you're breaking the law. No, we're not. Of course, we're never wrong. Now, you gotta wrap your head around that. Who is the only person in the universe who's never wrong? God.
Yeah.
So therefore, you're making him like God, just like Hitler was considered a god. Stalin, like a god. It's very dangerous. Any president you make into some of the things he's doing to draw attention, I don't agree with. It's, relax. You're just a citizen like we are, but that's neither here nor there right now. Any questions on that? But that's how I looked at it. I had to boil it down. I said, I love to think about what's happening. And that's the explanation I came up with that boils it down for us. Is, so that's why they're doing that. So that's a dangerous thing when you elevate yourself.
Yeah.
Just like I said, in the French Revolution, they did that. In the Soviet takeover, it was never a Bolshevik revolution. That's taught wrong in the schools and history books. Why? Because people usually who write like that, they tend to look at that and say, oh, well, it could be if we just gave communism a chance. I think we've given them a chance. They killed 100 million people in the last century.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of interesting that our whole kind of our governmental setup is under a microscope now.
Yeah.
It's been infiltrated. What was one of the greatest God-given organizations ever has been infiltrated from the bottom
Yes.
to the highest courts.
Yeah.
But now the highest courts are under investigation. They're being put under the microscope. So Americans need to pray even more
Yeah.
because everything is being turned upside down. You've got a federal judge sitting in Armpit, Iowa, saying
Yeah.
Trump can't do this. He
Yeah.
can't do that. The president can't do this. Everything is just, it's really, really out of control.
You mentioned, talk about the Constitution. They always say constitutional crisis if Trump sneezes in the White House, but there are some constitutional crises going on now that you mentioned about the courts, and I don't know how it's going to work out, but he's brought some things before the Supreme Court, and it's going to be very, very interesting to see.
Well, they just started an investigation. They're starting the investigations this week.
Yeah, can a
So-
district court say to the president, Article 2 was guaranteed him? Oh, no, we're more. So let's talk about this good old Constitution. Let's start here. Any questions so far? All right, this is fascinating. It says, we the people, and I told you it wasn't really the people, all right? But these men were, they had to do something. By the way, Rhode Island didn't show up. It was such a huge state, 1,000 square miles. But they wanted the best for it. They had fought the Revolutionary War, right? They were all together. Now they're kind of drifting apart. They were, in fact, almost like separate countries charging each other tariffs and tolls, which we know is causing a problem now, right? But I think they had a good heart. They wanted to come up with something good. So we, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, we already had a union, the Articles, but it wasn't working. Too weak. So we have to have something more perfect, something better than that. Establish justice. There were no courts. So we got to find some way of bringing people to the courts. Like I say, we're solving it. What's the problem? Let's go to the court and see if we can find out. Ensure domestic tranquility. In 1786, a guy named Daniel Shays from Massachusetts had rebelled against Massachusetts government, went into the courthouses, ripped up and burned records, tax records. He says, we fought against the British because of taxes. Now we're going to fight against you because of taxes. And they wound up, they still have the field preserved. This was getting out of hand, so the governor got the militia out and they, killed a whole bunch of people, of Shays' followers. And it's astounding. The field is still there. I can just picture these guys. Wow, they were fighting a long time. So this scared the people in Philadelphia. How we got to ensure the domestic tranquility of this place could, blow apart. To provide for the common defense. The articles were weak on that. What if, and this is not a supposition, they used to call this the critical period in history, but the British were saying, we'll wait, we'll pick you off one by one, you'll collapse, you can't start a republic, your country is too big, and you don't have a monarchy, and that's what we were afraid of. The British would come in. What about the Indians that are on the border? Common defense tells us what?
There's a common threat.
Hmm?
There's a common threat.
Yeah. If New York is attacked, should Pennsylvania help out? Or Massachusetts? Or say, well, this is your problem. Yeah, well, what if then you're attacked? And you call for the others. So we got to have a common defense. Somehow. I don't know how, but somehow. Promote the general welfare, that's kind of esoteric, right? The general welfare. And secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. Do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. So, let's see what kind of this would have worked great if there was a whole lot of people here, but there were a couple of suggestions. Virginia would like to have a government, there's the Virginia plan, based on population. Virginia was big, so was Pennsylvania. A lot of people. New Jersey and others said, I'm scared about that. Why?
Smaller.
They're small. If we have a national legislature based on population, every time something comes up, you're gonna say, yeah, sure, we like it. Or no, we don't like it. So how about this? Equal representation. Now Virginia and Pennsylvania, wait, no, slow down.
Right.
You want us to be on the same level as you? See the jealousy and the power, folks, right? It's just like Pastor was preaching, it's in James, you see what you want. Of course, you got this inside, you want power. They did too, they weren't, innocent. They wanted to protect their own interests, right? Yeah. So, okay, let's forget about this then. Let's go home. And say, we'll leave the articles as it is. No, come on, no, we can't do that. We got to find some sort of what?
Agreement.
Yeah, compromise.
Yep.
A guy named Roger Sherman from Connecticut, I'm finding more and more about him. He's a fantastic man. He proposed this. Instead of one house, or just, let's have this. Two houses. This is a great compromise. And this, in fact, started the whole ball running. Okay? He proposed that we have a two-house legislature with the Senate, 2 per state, elected every third year. Every second year, 1/3 of the senators, they started, it's in the Constitution, the first 2 years, then 4 years, then 6 years, till they start the ball rolling. So every 2 years, a senator is elected from a state. He serves 6 years, and you gotta be 30 years old. And as you pointed out before, the legislature elected, I think it was 23rd Amendment, because they didn't trust the people. And you gotta understand, this is what you would call, Hamilton, he was a monarchist. He wanted to call Washington Your Majesty. He was definitely of a king. And he was afraid of this. Mobocracy. Cracy means rule, the rule of the mob. He didn't trust the people. So they don't know what they're doing. We gotta, take them by the hand and all that. So, that's essentially, 2 per state. Here's Texas. Here's Rhode Island. 2. Doesn't matter how big. The one in the state who served longer is called the senior senator, despite his age, it doesn't matter. The lesser one is junior senator. So the junior senator could be older than the senior senator. Just goes by, and everything is done by seniority. That's why you got a lot of these old guys on both sides who are pretty creaky. Yeah. I didn't say about Kentucky, but what's his name? I can't think of it. But he was a Senate Majority Leader for a while, and he's like 90 years old. And it doesn't matter the age, somebody that's not doing so well. So both Republican and Democrat have some pretty old people there, and they want to try to get but seniority. That's it. You're there longer than someone else, you move up the ladder. And whether you're really qualified or not, it doesn't matter. The guy who's 3rd in line is Grassley from Iowa. He's 88 years old to the president. So if 3 guys get shot, he's president. How do you change that? You can't unless you change the Constitution, which we're going to talk about in amendments. All right. So at this time, 100 senators. All right. So now they wanted to call it House of Representatives. This whole thing is called the Congress. This is going to get a little confusing. And by the way, so many words in our language, where you put the accent changes the whole thing. To congress is a verb meaning to gather together.
Yeah.
To Congress makes it a noun. That's a place. All right? I had some other words there. Let's see if I could remember. That changed the whole meaning when you write them down. But since but you've seen some of these words that change the whole meaning just because where you put the anchor. So these are called congressmen. How they got that, I'm not sure. But the whole thing is the Congress. Just like I said, just like Rome had. Rome had the Senate, but then the people started to agitate and say, how come we don't have a say? So they set up the assembly, and there was guys named, they were tribunes. They were representatives of the people, and they could stand in the door of the Senate and yell out veto. That doesn't mean they're ordering a pizza or something from a guy. But VETO, of course, means I forbid. And that meant they couldn't pass that law against the people. And that's how we got the word. And then astounding, the Romans, they established everything. They're unbelievable people. So now we come to the House of Representatives, and as we're going to see here, look at Article 1, Section 1. All legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and a House of Representatives. We're going to see the clash between them now and the president, or in the courts. And we're living through a constitutional almost crisis, you might say.
mess.
Yeah.
Right, so the House of Representatives shall be composed of members chosen every second year by the people of the several states, okay? And he's got to be 25 And you know, they forget about how long you had in the country. That applied then because some people were British, maybe they came over, but you had to reside here. So, and his term is 2 years. And every 2 years is a Congress. I hope I'm confusing you here. This is it does get a little hard to understand at times. This whole thing is Congress. We get together in a Congress, but a Congress is 2 years. We're now in the 119th Congress. And there are 2 sessions. Obviously, it's going to be January to January is one session, then January 26th to 20, it would be another session, right? But it's 2 years, you gotta be 25 years old and a resident of the state from which you come. So there are 100 senators, 435 congressmen, fixed by law since around 1911, 1913. 11 it was passed, 13 it took out of it, that there can only be 435. So that's why population is so incredibly important.
Census.
Right, the census. Every 10 years, starting in 1790, a census has been taken to see about representation in the Congress. Now, what's been floating across our borders is people who will be counted, perhaps, and swayed to the leftist side of the Democrat, and maybe even voting, all right? That's going to be incredibly important. So, now for purposes of electoral votes, we have 538. Sound right?
Yes.
So 3 for DC.
That's right.
Okay.
I was hoping somebody did that.
Yeah.
See, I made a mistake. I purposely did. I think 22nd Amendment, 3 for DC. They said, "Why we vote, but we don't have any electoral votes." They said, "Okay, you're going to have the amount of electoral votes for the least populous state." There are about, I think, 6 states that have only 1 congressman. At large, it's called. 1, like Wyoming. Huge.
Yeah.
1. Vermont, 1. Delaware, 1. They have to have, by law, at least 1 representative. After that, it goes by population. That's why every 10 years, or every 4 years, when you go for electoral votes, how incredibly important it is. It used to be that New York was so huge, now Texas, Florida, you know, of course, California is still the biggest. And that's why they don't want, a lot of people don't want the popular vote, because they know a few big states get together, just like the original fear. Say, oh, good, we vote the president anytime we want. Well, what about us, Nebraska? What about, who cares about you? You don't have a lot of people. So, you know, we're gonna run the country our way, okay?
Are DC's representatives non-voting?
No, they could, oh yeah, pretty much on board, yeah, only these people could vote.
Oh, so like their advisory or something?
Yeah, right, same thing with Guam and, you know, Puerto Rico, like that. But it comes time for election year, if they do vote, yeah,
Okay.
they count. So that's how you get you need 270 electoral votes to win. That's why you need 270. Since the amount of representatives is fixed, it used to be, I think, it started out 30,000 in the Constitution. Now it's something like 760,000 people per congressional district. Of course, the number stays the same, so therefore we gotta, and that's why it's incredibly important that New York is losing, Florida's gaining. Things like that, going down to the Sun Belt. But the number stays the same, but how it's distributed among the states is incredibly important. I mean, it's vicious. We run for election, the British, the staid British, they stand for election. I love that, you know.
When did the speakers come in?
Okay.
How they choose, like Mitch McConnell and them?
Yeah. Look at on this page 5, down a to the third paragraph, the House of Representatives shall choose their speaker and other officers and have the sole power of impeachment. So it doesn't, by the way, it doesn't say it has to be a representative. You can get somebody from the outside, technically, to be the speaker.
Yeah.
He's second in line after if the president dies, he's second in line. And then your president pro tem, of the Senate. So then we just look at this, the Senate of the United States shall be composed of 2 senators from each, blah, 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 so right? So we looked at that. So if someone's impeached, what does that mean?
Well,
No, everybody gets that, everybody think that.
Yeah.
What does impeachment mean?
I don't know, I haven't seen anything happen.
Yeah, well,
I mean, you're impeached, but what?
Trump was impeached twice.
And
For
Bill Clinton and
with Bill Clinton and
the same thing as censure, nothing.
Andrew Johnson. By one vote, they saved the presidency there. Impeach just means to accuse, to bring to trial.
Oh, okay.
All right, just means just like somebody's arrested, doesn't mean he's guilty. You got to go to trial. So yeah, all right. So you got that right. Go to the next page. Let's see what we got here. Go down to the middle of the page 6. The Vice President of the United States shall be President of the Senate, but shall have no vote unless they be equally divided.
Time.
In the last administration, Kamala Harris, I think they got, I don't know, 30 times, something like that, broke a tie. That's the only vote they have. Otherwise, they preside and over the Senate, and that's why they get the President pro tem, who's there most of the time. Like I said, that's Grassley now. Paragraph at the end, the Senate shall have the sole power to try all impeachments. So you impeach in the House, you accuse in the House, you bring them over to the Senate. And a judge maybe, or some other public official will be put on trial. When sitting for that purpose, they shall be on oath or affirmation. The affirmation is a legal term. Christians are not supposed to swear, so you can say, I affirm, which one president did. Zachary Taylor, I believe it was. I affirm that I will follow the Constitution, like that.
Yeah.
When the President of the United States is tried, the Chief Justice shall preside, which happened, Roberts did that. And no person shall be convicted without the concurrence of 2/3 of the members present, which is very hard to get. That's called a supermajority. And that's why Clinton or Trump were not convicted. They were impeached, but not convicted, okay? Then the judgment in cases of impeachment shall not extend further than removal from office and disqualification to hold and enjoy any office of honor, trust, or profit under the United States. All right? Section 4, they can set up their own rules for their own elections of party whip or majority or whatever, and some of those are pretty tough elections. Years ago in the House, they would rule like a dictator, literally. Uncle Joe Cannon, the early part of the 1900s, picked every chairman, every member. I mean, they ruled like unbelievable. In fact, even up to the 50s, 2 guys ran the whole government. Not Eisenhower or Kennedy. It was Johnson and Rayburn, both from Texas.
Oh.
And they held the Congress in its grip. And if you wanted something done, you asked them. These guys, all Southerners, they had the solid South. They ruled the Senate, and pretty much the House. So when Kennedy came in, he said, okay, guys, here's what we're going to do. I said, boy, who are you talking to? we were around since you were in rompers. You all better change your tone, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And Kennedy kind of said, oh, okay, do you think we could do this or that? And he said, oh, we'll think about it, boy. You know, and you can't go against these guys. They're entrenched.
Yeah.
You know, that's the system, right? Section 5 says each house will judge its own record, qualifications and all that stuff, all right?
Yeah.
Next paragraph, each house shall, the rules of proceedings. And also they have, the last paragraph, they have to keep a journal. Doesn't have to be honest, but they have to keep it. For instance, they have things, they said in the Congressional Journal, that a fantastic speech they made that they never made. I said, could you slip this into the, so if somebody from home reads about it, wow, what a speech. Not knowing the guy never spoke a word, but that's our government. Don't forget, it's a government of men, right?
That's right.
And Republican or Democrat, they want to. Okay, so now here's section 6. This is important. The senators and representatives shall receive a compensation for their services to be ascertained by law and paid out of the Treasury of the United States, not the president, not anybody else. They shall, in all cases except treason, felony, and breach of the peace, be privileged from arrest during their attendance at the session of their respective houses, and in going to and returning from the same. They don't want guys to be arrested just because he was going and keep him from voting, and
Yeah.
And for any speech or debate in either house, they shall not be questioned in any other place. Maxine Waters, she's on tape as saying, go, get those people, get in. She's a nut, all right. She wasn't in the congressional business.
She's dangerous.
They're very dangerous. Now storming that ICE facility, that's not part of, that's not protected. They say, oh, no, it is. Don't forget square number 1. But we say, no, the law says you're not protected. You're not doing congressional business.
No.
You're usurping, the law and order, which you said you would uphold, all right?
Well, Chuck Schumer threatened the Supreme Court,
That's right, remember that?
standing on the steps.
He threatened, Kavanaugh.
Kavanaugh.
You got Kavanaugh. Plus, they allowed them to parade, remember they marched in front of Alito's house? That's against the law. What did our law and order people do? Nothing. But we're different. Don't forget, we're different.
But never wrong.
Huh?
But never
We're never wrong. Never wrong. You might think we are, but we're not. Now, section 7 is important. All bills for raising revenue shall originate in the House of Representatives. All right, but that doesn't mean it stays it. But the Senate may propose or concur with amendments as to order bills, because that's the House of the people, they call it. So all revenue bills have to start in the House, but they have to go to the Senate for approval. For instance, now that big beautiful bill that Trump won,
Right.
it's in the House, has to start in the House. He didn't get it. They knocked him down. There are a lot of, several conservatives. But it starts there. Had it passed, it would still have to go to the Senate. They thresh it out and talk it over, and right then. So here's what happens. Every bill that they pass, section as part of section 7, you have to go to the president. He can veto it. There's that word again. I forbid. And you have to go back then to the Congress, both houses, by 2/3 of a vote. See, this is how these guys are thinking. If you like that law enough, you will get enough senators and congressmen to pass it. It's called to override the veto. Otherwise, you can keep it in his pocket. It's called a pocket veto, 10 days, and it becomes law. I don't know why they allowed that one, but maybe you could. Don't forget, we're talking about a couple 100 years ago when travel, they couldn't get people back. So it's very different thinking than now, okay? Now let's look at over the next page. I'll only keep you another few minutes. I'm sorry to go so long, but this is incredibly important, isn't it? Section 8, that doesn't mean in the military, right? Section 8.
Cleaner.
Yeah. This is part of the delegated powers. We're going to talk about different powers of the federal government and the state government. That's very important. And it's still battling it out to this day. So these are delegated powers given to the federal government. Now, there's gonna be a battle. It still is.
Yeah.
We'll just look at some of these, and then we might get, we'll just do Article 1, all right? Would you mind another few minutes? I'll just, if I'm going too fast, you let me know, okay? But these are delegated. The Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes. They didn't under the article. Now they got the power. You gotta pay.
Yeah.
It's a crime of omission. Just like when I got my draft notice, if I should have said, by the way, it didn't say, Mr. Casey, if you get a chance, could you come down and we'd like to talk to you? No, it was like, if I had said no, that's a crime. I would have gotten me. Same thing with taxes. I didn't do it. That's right. You didn't pay your taxes. All right. So but duties, imports, and imposts and excises to pay the debts and provide for the common defense. See that? They needed money for the Army and the Navy. So that's why now you gotta pay up for those things. Next page. We can borrow money on the credit of the United States, which is incredibly important, just like a company. If it's not doing well, it goes down. They gotta pay more to borrow if they could get the cash. And it hurts their bottom line, it hurts their stockholders. People may not, it's not a good thing. So we got, and that was Hamilton. He was the guy, you gotta have a money system. Go down a little further, to coin money, regulate the value thereof. That's a federal thing. That's why you have the Secret Service. All they do all day long is study a real bill. They never study fake bills. They get to know, I used to have them come into my classroom. These guys were terrific. And we caught a guy, one of the students had a counterfeit bill. He tried to pass it off in the cafeteria. So we talked him into the office and, But that's a federal thing. No state can have its own, which they used to. States, grocery stores, hostelry, people were handing money out. No, only a federal thing, all right? So they can punish counterfeiters there. Go a little further down. This is so important to promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing for limited times to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries. I forget what it is now. I think almost for your lifetime. But that's so important. Think about it.
Copyright is 75 years after the author's death, or 100 years if it's a company. So public domain is like 1929-ish right now.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, I like that. I got a story copyrighted. I helped a student with this. It's very important because it's yours. And you don't want to invent something and somebody, hey, thank you. I'll take this. Industrial espionage is so prevalent. Ford spies on General Motors, and they spy on Ford. What's going on? What's the new paint? A new gearbox? A new that could mean, and we don't have to invent it. Let them invent it. We'll steal it, just like you would from another, company. All right.
Oddly, I think patents are 7 years and then renewed for 7 more. So
7 more.
I think 14 is the max.
Yeah.
But copyright's a long time.
Yes, which I find odd because. The other one is so important. Your own invention. For instance, drugs take so long to patent to get they're secure. To constitute tribunals inferior to the Supreme Court, which we're gonna when we come to it, we'll see a 3-tiered system. All right. To define and punish piracies, we don't have that. To declare war. Here's a good question for you. Let's see how many official wars have there been in the U.S.?
World War II.
All right, let's try World War II.
World War One.
One, yeah.
Not yet.
1812 was probably.
Yeah, 1812.
Mexican?
Yep. My ancestor fought in that one.
I assume technically the Civil War was.
No,
Really?
it was a civil war. to
I
the
didn't know if
side.
the Congress had to declare war on the Confederacy.
No, they split off, and here you go, we gotta get those people back, that's all, yeah.
Yeah,
One more.
Korea, Vietnam, and Persian Gulf were not.
Right.
French and Indian War?
Nope, that was before we even were a country.
No, that's right.
Well, it's pretty obscure, this next one. It was a 4-month war.
Alamo?
No, that's Alamo, that's down Texas territory. I got a book on it, it's a fantastic book of pictures. Spanish-American War,
Okay.
4 months in April, I think. In fact, one of the ships came from the Pacific to help out in Cuba. By the time it got there, the war was over. So they said, I think we need a canal. And that's when
That's digging.
Roosevelt had them start digging, and the Congress said, hey, what are you doing? He says, well, the debate goes on, so does the canal. And it was finished in 1914, just in time for World War. But we've only had 5 declared war. The president has to go to Congress and say, these are the reasons why these people have been assaulting us, this and that. I ask you for a declaration of war. And he can say no, or they can say it, which pretty much they have said yes, all right? Over on page 11, to provide for calling forth the militia to execute the laws of the United States, which Washington did in the Whiskey Rebellion, suppress insurrections and repel invasions, which Trump is saying he's doing now. See how current this is? He said, since this is invasion of 15, 20 million people coming in, unvetted, I need extraordinary powers. Other people say, no, you're going to become a dictator, you know? But, yeah, that's things don't change so much. Huh? All right, go further down, next to the last paragraph. This is so broad, to make all laws which would be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers. That's called a necessary and proper clause. What does that mean? It's like an elastic band, isn't it?
Yeah.
It means what we say it is.
Covers everything.
Yeah, whatever we think is necessary and proper, and if we could override the president's veto, but then you have now congressional dictatorship, which almost happened in 1868 when Johnson was tried. It was on the verge of what they called the imperial legislature, imperial Congress, all right? And then look a little further down. This is about slavery. It shall exist for 20 years, then you can't import them anymore. And by the way, you've all heard of the 3/5 compromise? That used to be in place for purposes of, that was the next big compromise to, of course, the South said, we got a lot of slaves, let's count them for population. And the North said, no. Let's count them, just for taxes. And the South said, no, that's not fair. All right, let's have a compromise. We'll count all your slaves. They will count for 3/5 of a person. For both representation and taxes. And that died out, of course, with the Civil War amendments, 13, 14, 15. They were freed there. All right, so that didn't work there. Now, here's another one on page 12, which is so current today. Boy, I'm keeping you too long here. I'm sorry, but I wanted to get this. The privilege of writ of habeas corpus. We're going to talk about that when we come to the Bill of Rights. That means deliver up the body, or want to see the body, or present the body. Shall not be suspended unless when in cases of rebellion or invasion, the public safety may require it. Trump says, we're being invaded, we have a problem, I can suspend habeas corpus, just like Lincoln did in the Civil War, war between the states, right? So, I'll just end with this. No bill of attainder, meaning a special punishable bill, for your group or ex post facto law shall be passed. Incredibly important. That means that somebody commits a heinous crime and you look it up, oh, we can't do anything, we can't give them the death penalty because we didn't have it at the time. I know, let's pass a death penalty law that takes place 5 years before he did this crime. Can't do that. That's an ex post facto law before the fact. So like it or not, you have to go by what the law says now. And if the law says he doesn't get executed and only your life, then they have to go by that. But the law takes place from this point forward. Got that?
Yeah.
Not backward.
Yeah,
Which is great. Well, think about it.
yeah.
What a president could do, or Congress, is, hey, we don't like your group, so we're gonna pass a law that you guys were illegal 20 years ago. Thank God, this is unbelievable thing. So let's stop there. I don't want to go too far.
Well, the states are doing that now because New York created a law so that they could take Trump to court on
Yeah.
they're doing that. And slavery is back too, because it's coming across the border
That's right.
and they're counting them. It's the exact same thing.
That Letitia James, who ran on, I'm going to get Trump. Well, that's a great, campaign. She says now that she's under investigation for. Oh, that's not fair. It's the rule of law. Yeah, for you too. No. Square number one says not only for Trump. So yeah, it comes back to bite you,
Yes,
right?
it does.
All right, folks. And then we'll look at the computer just a second. But any